Today we have Mary, Gersema, and Ed Felker, who live in Washington D.C. They've completed PBP a total of 3 times on their Tandem. Ed has also an additional 3 PBPs as an individual rider to his credit. Mary is also responsible for creating Coffeeneuring, which is an end-of-season challenge involving bikes and coffee shop visits. Mary and Ed, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned to you before, since there's 2 of you, we're going to get twice as much information, which is wonderful. Okay? So, first question, and I'm going to start with Mary each time. I always like to ask this first question, Mary. What does completing PBP mean to you?
For me, I think it means that you're leaving a piece of yourself on historic roads, on a historic event. You're a part of that. You're part of this event that dates back to like 1891 or something. And you get to say that, you get to be part of that. And I think it also means that you were able to have not only the planning come together, but the actual execution of the event come together. And I think for Ed and me, that's very exciting.
Nice. And that was a great answer. Do you think you can beat that one?
Well,
what does it mean to you?
That's mostly my answer in better words. I just say I feel a very deep sense of satisfaction and meaning as a randonneur to complete PBP, being the original 1200K, and I really appreciate feeling like I honored the French people who support and stage the ride, and the tradition of the ride itself of getting to the finish line, one way or another, despite rain, cold, sleep deprivation, and other things that might happen. So there's a big part of me that's completely relieved that nothing, that it's all come together. We made it. We made it. But it's really a long-lasting satisfaction that I honored the event.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I would imagine more things can go wrong on a tandem. Right? There's probably like a 30% chance more of something going wrong. Who knows? You know.
I think it's more that you wouldn't have the part to fix it.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mary, what was it like crossing the finish line for the very first time?
It's hard to remember that exact moment, but that whole event, I was full of elation, full of feeling, full of energy, and everything was the first time. And, I'm a marathon runner as well, and PBP was like doing the Marine Corps marathon for days. And people cheering for you, and you just are part of this amazing experience. I remember riding along and being like, "There's French cows over there," the history, and you could feel how old the event is. So I think that it was just like from beginning to end, it was this nonstop. Well, let's be honest, there was some non-elation, but there was a lot of just like an amazing positive feeling in finishing it the first time and doing it the first time and really getting like, oh, this is why everyone says you got to go to PBP. There's nothing like PBP. It's true. There's nothing like it.
So true. And Ed, what's interesting, you had done it 3 times before that as a single rider. Maybe contrast the 2 feelings, your first single ride completion versus being on a tandem for the first time.
Yeah, that's an interesting it's an interesting juxtaposition, because the first time I went, I was convinced that I had to finish it in as low a time as possible, and so you'll see of the 5 of them I've done solo and with Mary, of 5 of them have all been around 81 hours. But that first one was 70 hours. And I pretty much just drove myself in all night, the third night. We've always done the 84-hour start. So, so instead of sleeping on the third night, I just drove myself in with another group and got dropped, and I was out there by myself, and I refused to stop. And so I kind of staggered in with a group of about 8 of us at 4 a.m. with one person in the gymnasium awake to take our cards. And they just said, voila, and we just kind of looked at each other and walked away. And I laid and there were a few random people waiting for loved ones out on the street. So that was it took a while for that one to sink in because I was just so glad to be done. The first one we did on Tandem, I just felt like we were our own 2-person parade coming in to Saint-Quentin, where it still was at that time. And I think I was waving to the crowd. There's a big crowd out in the circle at the finish, cheering, and we came in the afternoon, and we had a friend of ours who had lived in D.C. and started randonneuring with me in the early days. He had come over from London and ridden with us, so we had a threesome, and it was just fantastic. So Mary is a stronger finisher than me, so I always come in a little crushed, but I was still it was just so good for the 2 of us to complete it together on one bike. We get a lot of extra attention being on the Tandem, which was nice. So it was a little bit more triumphal the first time on Tandem.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
nice.
Yeah. Let's go back to maybe start. Tell me about your background in cycling, Mary. Why do you ride? Maybe also touch on your Coffeeneuring, the word I'm still learning how to say.
Sure. No, you're saying it perfectly.
Thank you.
Coffeeneuring.
Thank you.
Yes, well done. It is a made-up word, but yet we still have rules about how to say it. I started riding as a young person. I'm from a very small town in Iowa, and so my motivation for riding was to be able to extend my reach, essentially, and my orbit, my physical orbit. So I learned to ride a bike, and then I could ride from one end of town to the other, which was like, a half mile. So I thought I was awesome. And I remember my sister and I like riding around town, and could we ride around the whole town no-handed? Those were great days. And so I've always ridden a bike, probably like many people that you've spoken to. And then when I was in high school, being from Iowa, these 2 guys came in and they said that they were on this bike ride that was going across the whole state, which is RAGBRAI, Register's Annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. And I was just like, what? People do that? Yeah. That's amazing. And so my first foray into long distance riding was really doing RAGBRAI.
Wow.
And then a friend of mine told me about randonneuring, and then I became involved in randonneuring. And I think I was thinking about why I ride randonneuring rides specifically, and I ride long rides because I think you can ride yourself into a place where you are completely present, where you are in step with everything around you, and you can, or at least for me, I see myself as part of the universe.
Okay.
And it's this amazing feeling, and it's very fleeting, and you don't know when it's going to happen, but if you keep pedaling a long time, you're probably going to get there.
That's great.
And so I ride to chase after that.
That's nice.
Really.
That's cool.
And I started Coffeeneuring because someone who was also a randonneur suggested in 2011 that we'd done a lot of long rides and training for PBP. Why don't we have an award for riding to a coffee shop? And I thought, well, we should have that. And so I started it, and just to see, and I added a bunch of rules along with it, because
cool.
it wouldn't be a Neuring challenge if you didn't have that.
Yeah.
And it just grew from there. And it's been a really amazing event season. We kind of call it a season, the Coffeeneuring season. It goes on from like the beginning of October to end of November. And I think it really exposed me to the fact that any any ride can be a triumph because you don't always know that you're going to be able to ride long. You may not always be able to, right? You may have something happen to you, a health event, or something like Ed had something significant happen earlier this year. And so Coffeeneuring, I think, is something that widens my appreciation for riding and the people who get on bikes and
Yeah.
step outside their house and go for a long or a short ride. And I think it's a cycle too because I think people feel compelled to want to go outside where maybe they would stay inside.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
And Mary, am I right in saying you don't achieve that transcendental being at one with the universe when coffee-neuring? Is that right? It's a different vibe.
it's a different vibe.
Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Good.
it's a completely different vibe.
Okay. Cool. Ed, do you want to tell us about why you ride, why you like riding, your background, everything like that?
Sure, sure. My story isn't that different from Mary's. I grew up in a small town in Illinois where all of us kids rode bikes. That's how we got out of the house and got on little misadventures. We have a hill in town that had a dirt alley from the top to the bottom. So we had if this might make sense to you, we had little repack races.
Okay. Nice, yeah.
These little downhill clunker bike races down the hill. But I rode everywhere as a kid. I took a bike with me everywhere to college and always had a bike around with me. And when I started, I was a runner too, but when I was getting in my later 20s, I decided to get in better shape and started riding more. And I joined the local bike club out here called Potomac Peddlers that runs weekend rides of a lot of distances below a century, 40, 50 miles. I liked those, but I thought they ended too soon, especially for the drive. You drive a half hour, you ride 3 hours, drive another hour to get home. And so that club at the time contained the randonneurs, and in their schedule, the randonneurs were part of that club and would put in their schedule. And I did it my first century in the fall. My first year of doing 5,000 miles, you got an award for 5,000 miles. And I did my first century, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And so they had a 200K in the spring, and I said, what the heck, I can do that. And I went out and nearly cried because I got to the 100-mile mark and my legs kind of died on me and I had to pull over and rest.
It's a reoccurring theme.
Yes, yeah. But on that exact ride, that 200K, I met a group of people who did a century every weekend. And it was a centuries group. Actually, they did back to back, if you really wanted to go with them. And so I rode with them, and they all talked about PBP, and I had heard of it. And a couple of them had done PBP, and so I just decided I was going to do it. And I talked to my friend who ended up living in London, and in '98 we started getting our act together. And that year we had the 2-year qualifying rule. So we qualified in '98 and then went in '99. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So my next question was going to be, how did you originally hear about PBP? But we covered that one. That's good.
Yeah.
And Mary, were you aware of PBP yourself or not?
I really was not. Ed was the person who said, we got to go.
Okay, that's great. Okay. And then once you decided, well, actually, first of all, tell me your background. When did you start tandem riding? And did you start on a tandem saying we're going to do PBP one day, or it just was more organic than that?
it was more organic than that.
Yeah.
We started riding tandem at the end of 2004, and our first ride together was a century ride on tandem. I guess I was going through a very adventurous phase of my life.
Okay.
I was like, this is what could go wrong?
Exactly.
And so that's how we started tandeming together.
Yeah,
Really that.
if I could, Mary was recruited into a flesh team, and
Okay.
one of the people on I was an all women's flesh team called the Randonettes, and one of them knew me and knew I had a tandem in my basement, and suggested to Mary that if she wanted to get some more miles in with somebody who knew the roads, she could get in touch with me.
Oh,
So
okay.
we went and met
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
Century group that I was talking about. We went and met them on a December Saturday, and rode 100 miles on this 1980s tandem that was too big for me and too small for Mary. And when we stood up, the thing veered sideways violently.
It was very noodly.
We didn't crash. We didn't crash, but that was our. That's. And I was already planning to go back to PBP in '07. But
Yeah.
but Mary, you can talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Mary, can I ask what had been your longest ride as a single rider before the tandem?
It was a century ride
Okay.
prior to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember getting on a tandem? These are the questions. I've never been on a tandem in my life, but because it is giving up a certain amount of control. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that feel?
I I think as I became more experienced as a rider, it was something I thought about more. And I think it comes, honestly, I think it comes, for me, it comes more into play when I'm riding in the city. Because I think everyone has their ideas about how to ride around their town.
Yes.
And not, and no one is in complete agreement about the
Completely.
best way.
Yeah.
So I just noticed in town that sometimes the bike is going one direction, and I think it should have gone another direction.
Yes.
But so that's where I really noticed that there, you all, my voice
Yeah.
is my strong method of communication.
Yeah.
And but other than that, I think for me it seems to have worked. It doesn't bother me that Ed is in the front steering on randonneuring rides, because I think it's how we've always ridden together
Yeah.
on long distance rides. But I know for some, and we also, I do ride a little bit larger gear when I'm riding my single bike than Ed does. But on the tandem, it works, and I'll spin a little bit faster, and that's fine.
Yeah. And like
So
percentage wise, you guys both still ride single bikes, I assume, right?
Hmm.
hmm
So then, like, what's the breakdown? Is it, 50% of your time on a single bike versus 50% on the tandem, or is it tandem just for special occasions?
it used to be more split,
Okay.
I think. And then it was like it was more split for a while, and then I felt like I was riding less single bike and more tandem,
Yeah.
and that was predominantly, I think, when COVID happened, and we were doing a lot more long riding on the weekends out in the country, and I was doing less commuting and only really necessary transportation cycling. And now we haven't ridden the tandem all year because that's been injured. So back to the single bike lifestyle, which has actually been a little bit of an adjustment, but
Okay. That's funny.
still, I still remember how to ride a single bike. So,
So it's like a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so
But
maybe then, I'm kind of fascinated about tandems and PBP. So then, Ed, you had done PBP
hmm
before, and you
hmm
decided, okay, as a couple, as on a tandem, we're going to do PBP.
right.
So maybe tell us about some of the differences in like even bringing the tandem is a pain
Yeah.
in the ass, I'm sure,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
But just the
can be.
strategy as well, like the whole thing, like how did you, like you knew it would differ from your experience, I would imagine, last time.
Yeah. The well, in anticipation of going to PBP, we did buy a custom tandem with couplers so that we could pack it into suitcases and not take, the giant box. Because I had seen that, I had seen that in action and knew. And we had traveled once with a tandem out to the Cascade 1200, a full-size tandem, and I was like, never again. It's too big of a box.
Okay.
So we that. And so it is a lot to take, but with two people, it's manageable. The strategy. Well, I insisted that we do the 84-hour start because we had shown on brevets that we would make the cutoffs for the. It's a shorter cutoff to Brest, obviously shorter cutoff at the end. I had heard that tandems and other special bikes go first, and that appealed to me a lot. So we get to roll out at the front of the entire field, either the 90s or the 84s, but as the 84s, so we get a car to take us out into the country. The final piece of strategy is we just replicated the strategy I was using as a single bike rider. Which was to get to Ludiac and sleep, come back to Ludiac and sleep, and then come back to Mortain and sleep, and do 3 sleep stops, and in those distances. So we kind of kept that in mind for our training, that we'd have this big, massive first day, and then each day would get shorter. And kind of knew when we'd arrive, and that we'd be able to sleep some during the night, which appeals. To me personally, I don't really see myself as a nighttime start rider because of my circadian rhythms. And then in terms of the bike itself, the 84-hour start works best for us because there's fewer riders. And it never fails that we attract a crowd behind us. And we occasionally have to let people know that they can't pull us. We have a completely different momentum, so we can't draft behind people. You're welcome to be in the back or along the side, and we have an 8-foot bike, so we take up a lot of space. We have to be careful of our movements around other riders. So that's why we like the 84-hour start. It's a little calmer, and there's fewer riders along the way, at least until the tail end of the entire event, where we start catching some of the hors delay 90s. Yeah.
I think, were you friends with Roy from California?
Yeah.
Okay, because I remember I was good friends with him as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember in 2019, I think he was riding with you guys. So I actually may have met you in person. And I think I remember trying to join with my 2 friends behind you guys. And it was just too many people. It was crazy, and it felt dangerous,
Yeah, right.
Which obviously wasn't your fault, but so you guys just attract a lot of people, hangers-on all the time. Is it stressful at all?
Mary, do you want to take that?
I sometimes find that it can be stressful if I feel someone's energy is entering into my space, because I'm in the back, and so sometimes people can feel too close, or they want to talk to you, or they somehow think that suddenly this is their wheel versus our bike, and they're making a cameo appearance into our ride. So I think it really depends, and it's nice to have someone behind you where you know them and trust them, and you've ridden together before, and that you know their state of mind. And I think when you're riding PBP or along any event, really, there's a lot of people that just want to glom on wheels. Like, people they're driven by this primal urge to glom onto the wheel in front of them. And a tandem is additionally exciting to people for whatever reason. So
it's funny as well, because the way you guys interact socially on a ride is very different as well, like with other riders, but also I would imagine with the lovely people of Brittany as well. They just love seeing a tandem, I suspect.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I'll add to what Mary said.
It is.
Mary, did you have anything more on that?
No, I was going to
Yeah.
add that I do, speaking of that, yes, I recall people stopping us. We were at a control or something, and they stopped and they were talking to us, and Ed took French,
Yeah.
so to prepare for going to France, and so he could say general introductions and who we are and
Yeah.
basics about PBP. And this couple and their friends were talking to us
Yeah.
about the tandem and love, and I didn't know what else, but it sounded really good. And I was like, yes,
That's great.
all of that.
That's cool. That's
Yeah,
funny.
I was just going to add, it's up to us in the end to manage our experience, and if we will have a secret conversation where we decide to take a break, even if it's a roadside break, if the dynamics behind us are starting to become distracting. And so
Yeah.
we had a minor argument break out this last time about amongst riders behind us of who was in front of whom. And we heard it. And so we said, we saw a pizza place and some bikes in front of it. And I said, I think this is a good time to pull over. And that
Yeah.
group rolled on and we had a nice stop. And sometimes you just have to, read the situation and take a small step to make things better. And that's just one of the things about, we had a young guy who just thanked us profusely for getting him into a control at one
Yeah,
point
that's nice.
because we'd been there before. We knew how to pace ourselves in, and he was gassed a little bit, and he was just so happy to turn his brain off and just follow the wheel.
Yeah.
So
that
that's
must feel
it can
good
be pretty
suddenly,
nice
yeah.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever ride with other tandems?
we we did a lot more of that starting out.
Yeah.
Happened to fall into a group of people that were riding tandem. So there were like three or four of us, I think, that
Yeah.
were meeting up to do brevets together on tandem or
And tour.
see if we could
Cool.
go faster than each other on a brevet. And then, yeah, we toured together. And so
That's great.
that sort of changed over time. But hmm
And then last question, because I'm clearly fixated. So when you meet someone with three, what do we call that? A treble, maybe? Treble?
A triple.
oh, the triplet?
Triplet. Okay. Okay. Do you ever meet those? No. Have you ever met them in France or
No.
anything? Okay.
Well,
No.
there's
I know there was a triplet there.
I thought I saw one. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
been
And that got around,
yeah, that was a triple, and there was a
You can't sneak around a course on a triplet.
oh, and there was a quad. There was a quad.
Yeah.
Was it this year or last time?
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Okay, so let me just see here. We talked about
But we,
logistics.
you talk about like because we did the special start at PBP, we were around other tandems. There were what was it, two other pairs with us on the 84 this time,
Yeah.
and they shot off into the distance because we're more of a
Yeah.
slow and steady start. But we eventually caught them, so it was interesting to overlap and compare hellos and a little bit of experiences when
Yeah.
we understood each other's situations.
So
And
that-
one of the teams actually they were switching. These
Oh,
two
okay.
guys, they were switching captain and stoker.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. So that's a
Yeah.
thing as well. Obviously, you have to be similar size. Is that the big thing?
Right.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So then, Mary, 2011, your first PBP on a tandem, and Ed had done it before. Did it feel? Tell me what it was like. Like, what was the whole of 2011 like? You knew you'd finish, okay,
Wow.
but you never know you're going to finish the first time, though. Isn't that right?
You never know. You
Yeah.
never know any ride. I ride committed to finishing, but you don't know what the ride's going to bring you. It's like its own story unfolding, right? So for us, what was really cool about PBP 2011 was Ed had the friend was it John Gardner who you'd ridden with in
Yeah.
one of the previous editions we happened to run into him, not we didn't crash, but we saw him on the second day. He had unknown, we thought he was gone. We saw him I think we saw him at maybe at check-in or something, but
Yeah.
we didn't think we'd see him again, and we ended up pairing up with him, and that pairing was so much fun. Like,
Yeah.
it was just a blast to ride through France together, and John just had great spirit, and I think it was like we became this kind of team. And John would go into every control and be like, "I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to sleep." And we're like, "He's going to stay with us," and he did. He always stayed with us, and so I think that was what was really special about finishing that first edition was, yeah, we planned, we executed according to plan, and we, you know, ran into our friend and got to experience
That's cool.
PBP with this person that, now lives in the UK. And we also experienced, we were riding for, was it a couple of days with this gentleman named Guy, who was from Brittany. And that was a blast. You're like, so anyway, to finish having had that experience and having ridden with a Frenchman who wanted to keep riding with us, it was all it was very exciting.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
so we had a great time. And at the end, I thought the party would keep going, but people finish and they're exhausted, and the party
Yes,
is over, and
exactly.
everyone is packing up, and
Yeah.
so that's it.
And tell me, and this is maybe a general question as well, Mary, did you have any low moments that first ride? Ed, you had low moments, and like, how do you manage different ups and downs on the one bicycle?
No, there were low moments on our ride. I think crawling into Morton is always very challenging. That section is hard. You're encountering people who are in the 90 hours and they've fallen off of time. I think also if you're in the 84-hour group, it can be hard mentally because you feel like you're at the very back of the pack.
Yeah.
And you are, but you're not out of time. You're fine. But you can feel that you're just like, "Oh my God, like we're not going to get there." And so the first time, I think the last day was hard. There was a lot of chip seal that I don't remember in retro, afterward, I don't remember it, but someone reminded me of like how much I was talking about it. Um, but and I recall that Ed had a low Ed had a low moment after during that slog to Morton where people kept trying to glom onto our wheel, and John and I were just talking our heads off, and Ed was just like, "You guys, you need to be quiet." Like, and we were just like, "Oh my God!" Like, okay, don't talk now.
That's funny. Cool. That's funny. Any comments, Ed, about that whole issue in general, highs and lows?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say every PBP has, like Mary said, is its own story, and
Yeah.
even though we take the 84 hours start and we do the same sleep stops, I've always done the same ones. Everyone's different. Mary is I'm a more energetic starter. So my I'm like a leaky bucket. And by the by the third, fourth day, like Mary said,
Yes. Yes.
it's starting. The fatigue is real. Where Mary has great finishing energy. She will keep me focused and keep the pedals turning
Yeah.
all the way to the end. So that we had issues in 2011 with keeping our space around other bikes. It was our first time on Tandem. I managed to roll right into the back of somebody's wheel on an uphill because their entire group slowed down as the Tandem charged into the base of the hill. We didn't go down, but it was sketchy there for a
Yeah.
minute. If you've ever fishtailed a Tandem, it's bracing. But that I would guess I'd say that the issue with the Tandem is obviously you can't ride no hands as the captain. Your hands are on the bars from start.
I didn't know that, but okay.
Yeah, you can't.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I guess a team could, but that's not us. So I can't zone out on the tandem. We got too much momentum. We're moving too quickly on the downhills, especially. Um, and that's where I've had to lift my game, is to be alert and eyes forward and not distracted all the way to the end. We had an issue in 2019 where a truck came right at us on a one lane street.
Yeah.
And I jumped us up on the curb and barely, you know, there's more to it. It involved the front wheel touching the side of a house.
Okay.
And Mary thoughtfully spilled onto the ground instead of the back of me, but there was no harm done. But
Yeah.
things, the tandem just requires more care and attention than you do on a single
Okay.
bike. Although you can have the same problems on a single bike for sure. So,
I get that.
yeah, and in the rain and downhills and things like that. Yeah.
So then you did it 2 subsequent times on a tandem.
Mm-hmm.
What changed? Did the strategy change in any way? How is it different?
One thing in terms of how it changed is that I will say that in 2011 I expected the 84-hour start to be like the 90-hour start, and it was the opposite of
Okay.
that, where it was like a few people in the parking lot, and the people were like,
Yeah.
don't go ahead of the motos, and okay, off you go, bye. And that's gotten a little bit more festive over the years, but I felt prepared for that in subsequent years, and I actually felt, for whatever reason, like more. I liked that. I liked the calmer start. I enjoyed being there for the party, for the 90-hour, watching
Yeah.
the 90s go off. But I feel better about saving my energy and being calm. And, for us, the start physically changed from Saint-Quentin in 2011. And then when we went back in 2019, the start was in Rambouillet, and we still stayed in Saint-Quentin
Okay.
and rode over the morning of to the start. And so that added some miles or kilometers to our ride, but it also really expanded on that feeling of calm, where we could just kind of
Yeah.
get on the bike and roll on over and on these quiet roads over to Rambouillet and start. So for me, that was one of the main changes.
Yeah.
What about you, Ed? What would you say?
Well, the tandem we rode in 2011 ended up cracking on us, and
Oh, okay.
at the very end of the Colorado High Country 1200 in 2012, we discovered afterwards it had cracked. So we went through a couple tandems, but we ended up settling on a 650B wheel tandem, and being able to ride nice 42 millimeter wide tires on some of the French chip seal was a game changer. That just made that made especially the roads on the final run in from Morton. There's some chip seal out there, and that made a huge difference. That.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
in terms of our overall strategy, we haven't changed much. It worked for us in 2011. We got the sleep we needed. We got the food we wanted. So we just kept doing that. I guess we didn't worry so much about speed, which consequently led to our lowest time was the third time. So
Okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
I was worried about speed on that. I was telling you that yesterday, that
yeah.
I got to a point after Brest where I was freaking out because, in part, you're riding with the back of the Packers, and then also I just got in my head about how far behind we were.
Yeah.
And I actually pulled up our results from 2019, and every time we got to a control, I would compare the time on the control card with the time from 2019, and we were always like at or ahead of that time. And so that was amazing
Yeah.
for me. Like, and it eased my mind so much, and I stopped burning so much energy thinking about us being behind. And I was
Yeah.
just like, this is all in your head. Just
Yeah.
keep pedaling. But that did actually become a strategy, at least for the mental game.
I get you.
And I was like, man, if I ever go back to PBP, I'm definitely pulling up the results and
That's true.
taking them with me.
So that leads me to my next question. Will we see you both again in 2027?
I say no, not me. I don't think so. I think that it was an amazing ride that we had in 2023, and I felt so appreciative about it, especially having all of us experienced COVID
Yeah.
and I think some very hard times. And I had just finished a master's program, and then to be able to do that and also do PBP, which was in large part, Ed really led the way on managing the bike and making hotel reservations, and I just really had to stay fit and show up.
Yeah.
So that was, thank you, Ed.
Okay.
But I think there's just a lot to do in the world, and I want to do it. And I want to do riding that's off road. I think that brevets in the US, at least for us in our area, there are beautiful rides, but sometimes you're put on busy connectors. And I think that right now I'm being drawn in a different direction, and I want to follow
That's
that.
cool. It's funny, Mary, because I'm very susceptible to streaks, and if I start a streak, it's very difficult to break it. But it sounds like you maybe
Yeah.
are better at that. Will it be easy to stop doing it?
For me,
Yeah.
well, if Ed goes, I mean, I'm like, hey, I'm also going.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah.
I I think, as I say, I think there's a lot to do in the
Yeah,
world.
which is
A
true.
lot.
Yeah. Ed, tell us.
What about you, Ed?
Go
No.
ahead. Sorry.
Oh, this isn't the right. I'm not going to rule anything out because, as you know, we did skip 2015 because it just didn't feel in our we had we and I had been randoneering for so many years that I didn't feel like I brought a fresh approach to it, and I didn't want to go there sort of out of habit. I wanted to go there fully charged up to go. Um, I will decide later if I go in 27. I would like to go, um, but I was involved. I was hit by a driver just about a year ago, and I've been rehabbing all of this year, um, and that was on a brevet, and it was no fault of anybody associated with the event. But it just reflected how much busier the roads have become around the DC
Yeah.
area. How much, and I feel like the impact of cell phones and cell phone mapping, distractions among drivers. So I'm going to decide later uh, whether I feel safe enough, whether I feel like qualifying again.
Yeah.
And having gone 6 times, I know I'm not. I will have seen plenty of it, and an alternative might be to go to France and support the ride in some other way. But
Yeah.
it's we approach PBP as a 2-year project. We like to do a full SR series the year before, plus another hard 600, plus a hilly tour, and really get in sync before the year of PBP. And if we're motivated to do that in 2026,
Yeah.
then it may happen.
Makes
We'll
sense.
we'll see
Makes
how it
sense.
goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Slightly related. Are there any advantages? Like, I'm always fascinated how old people can keep doing PBP. Do you think there's an advantage being on a tandem to try to keep going? I'm not talking about you two personally, but is that an easier way to complete PBP as you get older or not?
I can't speak to that aspect, but I do believe that PBP is a tandem friendly course relative to many other courses. And in that regard, it's fun to do it on a tandem.
Mary,
In
can
terms of age,
yeah.
I don't know.
Mary, can I ask, tandem friendly, so it just means it is rolling hills. Is that what you mean?
Good rollers that you
Okay.
can top over.
Okay, yeah.
Except for that section coming back into more time. Let's be
Okay,
honest.
the aforementioned
You're not
section.
topping nothing.
Okay. Ed, any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, we, we more than once we've mentioned the return for us as a night ride from Villaines to Mortain, and this time in 2023 we encountered the most I'd ever seen of mature riders having a very difficult time pedaling in a straight line, pedaling upright, being slumped over to one way or another on a bike. And us trying to get around some of these folks was a little bit of a challenge. And so I'm keeping in mind the fact that your nervous system takes a serious hit on a 4-day event like PBP, and we would keep in mind if so I would say the fact that the captain on the tandem has to stay alert, keep their hands on the bars, can't zone out, that could come into conflict with an aging person's reduced stamina, their nervous system stamina. And so we would have to sort of revalidate my ability as a captain for that long in 2026 before deciding to go back in 2027.
I get you.
I mean, it's a long way of saying I don't want to put us in the ditch because because my arms aren't as strong as they used to be, or my attention span starts to wander.
I get you.
So I would say, you've got twice the people, twice the length. We'll see. But we've seen some couples on tandem at PBP who are a fair bit older than us, and they chug right along. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to end, Mary and Ed, with the 3 tips. Okay. So each of you individually will offer 3 tips, and it's for tandem riders, I assume, but the single, I think it's pretty universal, a lot of these things. So Mary, would you like to go first? You're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go on to Ed, if that makes sense.
Sure. My first tip is I think you have to have a mantra. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
I can do this. I have a dumb one that I like to repeat. Every pedal stroke I take is one less that I have to make. And that mantra, it's like something repetitive in my head that helps me not have the monkey mind intrude as much, I think, on something that's that long. My second tip is belief. You show up at the start with the belief that you will finish. That for me is so important. It gets me in the right mindset.
Yeah.
And that belief comes from training appropriately and managing myself, my energy, my nutrition up to where I get to the start and know that I've done everything that I can to have a successful ride with, in my case, with my partner, and that we've worked out all the kinks in our bike and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses and how we need to look out for each other. So belief is my second tip. I think that is just so powerful. I think it's, if you say, I'm going to go and see how I do, you are not setting yourself up for success. So belief. And then the third tip is do what the tandem says. And we talked about this yesterday. The tandem momentum, as Ed has said, is different than a single bike's momentum. And so you're going down hills faster, you're going up hills probably a little bit slower than many or some of the single bike riders can do. And that's okay, but you have to accept that that's your momentum, that's how the bike is going to ride, and manage the event accordingly so that you're not a menace for other riders and you're not fighting your bike to try to ride with a bunch of single riders when your momentum isn't aligning with that. So do what the tandem tells you to do.
All very spiritual. I like all of those, Mary. Very good. Ed, you want to give us your 3?
Yeah, mine are a little bit more practical, but they get me through these. The first one is just eat and make a plan of where you're going to eat. So we know where we're going to eat because we try and stick to a normal day's eating. We try to have a breakfast, we try to have a lunch, we try to have a dinner, and not just nibble or get snacks or hope to find food somewhere. We pull in and eat at the cafeteria. As tiresome as that becomes after 4 days, we still walk into the cafeteria, get a tray, and sit down and eat it, no matter how overcooked the chicken is. The second one is sleep. We book a hotel room in Ludiac going both ways, and we look forward to that bed. That it's not in a dorm. We look forward to that hot shower in that bed. It's really motivating. And then if one of us is getting drowsy, we pull over and take a nap. So I think sleep, the old advantage of eat before you're hungry, counts for sleep too. I don't want to fall asleep on the bike. And my third one is a little bit more, I wouldn't say spiritual, but I've come to really feel that PBP goes best when you engage with the volunteers, you engage with the families that support the roadside stands, and you engage with some of the riders around you, especially if you sense someone needs a kind word or a little bit of encouragement. And so I feel like the more engaged we are, not only does the time go faster, but it's a more rich experience. And Mary said, I studied French before this last PBP, and it was kind of amazing because if we spoke just enough French to a French rider to introduce ourselves and say where we lived, it was like pulling the cork out of the champagne. And we had these French friends with us all of a sudden, speaking faster than I could keep up with. But we've gotten to know people at the controls now who recognize us from past PBPs. Great. And we've also gotten to know, like you said, we had a great group together in 2019 with the San Francisco group led by Rob and with Roy and briefly yourself. But the less you treat it as a sports event and more as a cultural experience, boy, it makes for some great memories. So that's and eat, sleep, and engage.
Excellent. Cool. Well, Mary and Ed, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. It's just so interesting learning about tandems, and it's a different thing, definitely, different momentum. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.